Well, I am JP Rolls, as you just said. I've written a few film scripts, most of which haven't been made. One of which is going to be made fairly soon. And a couple of books. Books are the most interesting, really. Is that being The Hangman of Abu Ghraib, which is the story of an Iraqi peasant who served under both Saddam and the American coalition. And I was the ghostwriter on Eddie Page's Project Aquarius book, which hopefully will be online soon.
And what about, you've had the involvement with the crystal skull, Mitchell-Hedges crystal skull. How did you meet the skull?
Right, well what it was quite funny because after Spielberg did the Indiana Jones series of movies, and he stopped doing them for a while, didn't he? And at the time I was trying to write film scripts, and I thought, I'll create a new character, a bit like Indiana Jones, but a bit younger, and give him an artifact. And the artifact I found most interesting, a real artifact, I wanted it to be, was the Mitchell-Hedges crystal skull. And basically that's how I contacted, through a friend of mine who knew her well. He wasn't a friend of mine at the time, but I contacted him and he contacted her. And she invited us both out to see her. She was living in America at the time. She was old. She was about 96. But yeah, so we flew out and we stayed with her at her house. And, she told me a lot about her past, her childhood, and Mitchel Hedges. I mean, Mitchel Hedges was the real Indiana Jones. He really was an explorer in the 1950s, British explorer, who made fortunes, found pirate gold, hacked through jungles, discovered undiscovered tribes. He was a big game fisherman, and he took Sammy, his daughter, adopted daughter, along with him. And so from a pretty young age, she was exposed to this thing. And the funny thing was that she was, in a way, the real Indiana Jones, because she was the one that carried the bullwhip. It wasn't Mitchel Hedges, it was her.
Did she find the skull as well?
She did.
And what was her account of that?
Well, it's interesting because there's lots of stuff on the internet about it, and there's people tell you various stories, but the story she told was that it was her. I think it was her 18th birthday, and they were exploring a Mayan ruin, a temple that had been,
in Mexico.
No, in Belize. And it had been hit by an earthquake, this pyramid, obviously way before they were there. And it cracked, and she said she saw something glinting down there. And so there was just enough room to send her down. She was a small little thing, she always was, especially in her 90s, I guess, but I think she was pretty slim, slender, in her youth and her middle age as well. So basically, they lowered her down on a rope, and she found the top part of the skull, and they hauled her up, and so that was her 18th birthday. It's like a present. Yeah,
and was it with the jaw as well?
No, they found the jaw a couple of days later. They lowered her down again. She did this thing, which must have been full of bloody, creepy crawlies and everything, but she wasn't worried about any of that. And she found the top half of the skull, and they brought her up. Now, what other people say is that Mitchel Hedges had got the crystal skull already, and he planted it in the pyramid for her to find as a birthday present for her, on her birthday. But she completely denies it.
Right, until the day she died, she denied that as well.
Yeah, there's no way she said that anyone could have gone down there and planted it. She was the first down there, and cobwebs and God knows what else everywhere. No one had been down there, no one had before her. And also, although he was a really kindly bloke and he had a great imagination and whatever, I don't think he'd have done that.
And there's a story, because I used to live on the Salisbury to Fordingbridge Road, and I went to Burgate, across the road from Burgate in Hampshire. That's where the skull was for a few years, because he had a house there, just up the road from where we are. That
was during the Second World War. And that's when the story goes, you see, that because they were away exploring quite a bit prior to the Second World War, that he used to have a lot of silver and valuable items, and there was no insurance in those days as there is today. So what he did was he gave it to a friend of his for safekeeping. All this stuff, a lot of it, you know, including the skull. And then when they didn't come back for a few years, one of them, because I think Mitchell-Hedges owed him some money, and I don't know quite what the story was. You know, again, I'd have to sort of refresh my memory on it. But Bernie decided, because he was short on money, to sell the skull. He put it up for auction. And Mitchell-Hedges, no, it was just someone he knew. It's like one they used to go to dinner with, and he'd just say, "I'm going exploring off to Belize, you know, might not come back, or, but anyway, the house is going to be empty for a couple of years. Could you look after some of the things he'd got?" A lot of the stuff he moved on. He was an antiques dealer, so he'd go around, buy silver, find someone who'd give him twice the price for it, move it on. The skull, he never wanted to sell that, you know, because she'd found it in Belize. But so he asked Bernie to look after the skull, and the story goes that, I don't know, Bernie was short on money, and so he put the skull in an auction.
Sort of bit of Christie's, wasn't it?
Yeah, and basically Mitchell-Hedges, he went, and bear in mind it was during the war, you know, it's difficult to get to London and everything like that. And he went, and rather than argue his case and say, withdraw it because I'm the original owner, remember there's no paperwork on it at all. It wasn't paperwork. He hadn't bought it somewhere. She found it in a bloody jungle. Rather than go through all that, because he was wealthy, he just bought it. He just bought it back a bit more than anyone else, so he got it back that way.
So
and people say, well, he didn't have it before 1940, whatever, because he bought it in the auction. Yeah, he did buy it at the auction.
But he was buying it back.
He was buying it back. And he didn't want to, you know, he just thought that's easy.
So then he took it to Fordingbridge?
No, I think he was living in Fordingbridge, I think, when this auction took place, and Bernie was living nearby. Yeah. So, that's why Bernie sort of sold it, or tried to sell it.
I just think it's a funny position of the skull between Stonehenge on that Salisbury Road all the way to Christchurch, where we are now, because that's a ley line, and having a crystal skull on our ley line, that's got to be special. Do you know how long it was there for?
Well, they bought these big houses and they'd live in them for a few years, and they'd go off exploring and then come back and buy another one, or they moved house a lot. They were all big manor houses. There was one in Reading. There was one.
You only had the one. It was the Hunter's Lodge, the retreat right opposite Burgate. The gamekeeper's cottage.
No, it wasn't. No, it wasn't. It was Burgate Manor. That's what I'm saying. They were big bloody houses. They weren't. They weren't little cottages. He had a load of stuff. He had the biggest private silver collection.
But you've met the skull, so the vibrations. What would your guessing of what the vibration of that skull on that ley line between Stonehenge, Glastonbury, and here, as in a diamond, as a triangle shape, would have done to our ley line?
I don't know, but all I can say is it is an extraordinary artefact. I think it really is.
Did you touch it?
Oh yeah.
And you took some crystals of your own, didn't you?
Yeah. When everyone did that, whenever anyone sort of saw it, they always have something to put on it. She told this fantastic story, which is no doubt true, right? Because she told it with such sincerity, and they wouldn't have made it up. What you have to know is these people, they don't make things up. They've got so many stories that are so interesting, they don't need to make it up. But what she said once, that I think she was living in Canada, because she lived for a while in this country, then she moved to Canada for a while, and then she finally went to America. But some children came round from school, they wanted to see it, so she got it out, put it in a cushion, and she left the room to get them some biscuits and some orange squash, and she could hear them, she sort of told them it's the skull of doom and everything, and left them with it for a while. And she suddenly heard these, petrified shrieks coming from these little boys. And what it had done was the sun coming in, it acted like a magnifying glass and set the cushion alight.
Oh shit!
I know, it's a really funny little story. And she said they were all shouting, and she rushed in and tipped the orange juice.
Did she sleep with it in her bedroom?
Yeah, she always
every
did.
night. She was a true guardian of it.
Apparently she dropped it a couple of times as well.
And what sort of dreams did she say she had with it next to her? Did it give her information?
No, I mean she didn't talk about it like that in that way. Really, it was just like a precious
She was just
object.
a guardian.
Yeah, she wasn't really into using it, if you know what I mean. She was more into just treasuring it and sort of.
Because I borrowed your crystal skull that you charged from that crystal skull, and charged all my crystals, and I'll tell you the dreamscapes that I had for that week when I had your crystal skull. Honestly, I went super galactic on that. It's a galactic skull. I got from it that it was grown crystal, grown in outer space.
Yeah.
It's not been made on Earth.
See, just talking about the skull, what's special about it, right, was that the story goes that obviously she kept it all the time. No one knew where it come from, because there's not, it was a chunk of pure crystal, pure rock quartz, and that's pretty rare in itself. And then the mind didn't have anything to sort of carve it with, so they've had to rub it down. The story was they rubbed it down with human hair. No, you see, there weren't any scratch marks on it, because in 1970s, no tooling marks. That's what's special about it.
It's impossible then, isn't it?
Well, it is impossible.
Because it disappears when
how could you rub that down with human hair? It would have taken you, and then you had to cut the jaw, so it must have had something.
I know people who work with crystals know exactly how long it takes, and that's with modern machinery.
It was something like 3,000 years it would have taken to polish it down with human hair.
Older than what the Bible says we
human
are.
hair, yeah. So anyway, no one knew how it was done, but the thing was, she had it analysed in the 1970s by Hewlett-Packard, who at the time were the foremost crystal experts. Because as you know, crystal, the first wireless set, crystal is used in some shape or form in just about every transmitting or receiving device, like your iPhones, everything nowadays.
Television.
It's not quite a lump of quartz, obviously, but the wireless set, the crudest wireless set, works on crystal. And that's why it was seen as a sort of storage or transmitting device. And so that's why I'm trying to explain why Hewlett-Packard had it, why they were the experts. But what they said was that it was cut out of a single piece of quartz because the jaw matched the head bit, and there were no scratch marks on it. And they looked at it through the most powerful microscope of the day. There were no scratch marks, and it was one single piece of quartz that had the teeth cut round for the jaw, because the jaw, people don't know it, the jaw comes loose, you can and it's perfect, and it's the right size for a human head.
It's the same piece of crystal.
It's the same bit of crystal, and it's like a human head. It's the same size as a head, a real head. And that's what they found, you see, and that's what made it special, because they were saying who could have done it, because if it was made, the other theory is that it was carved in Germany, right? That's what people who dismiss it.
Jewelry maker.
Yeah, in the sort of 1800s, Victorian times.
But then they found the other two skulls, but they found machine marks on them.
Yeah,
and they
yeah,
they
were, some turned out in Mexico and all sorts of things like that. But they all had scratch marks on it. You can see where the wheel had ground it down. If you look under a microscope, you see those scratch marks. But the point is this: if someone had made that skull in the 18 whatever it was, right, being such an exquisite work of art and the biggest, basically, jewel that had been carved at the time, there'd be records of it, and it would have been passed down. Someone would have bought it for a lot of money.
It's a masterpiece.
Yeah, it's a masterpiece. So someone would know about it, right, from the Victorian times to when Sammy allegedly found it, because people say she didn't. In 1920s, there'd be a track of it. How did it get from Germany to being found there? Or how did it get from Germany in Victorian days to the auction in the house in 1940s? There'd be a track, there'd be something, right? And the other thing is, if a jeweller had done that, right, if a jeweller had made it, he would have made a few other pieces, not necessarily skulls.
Practice pieces.
Well, yeah, or other magnificent pieces, unless he just happened to do this one and then drop down dead, which is unlikely. In which case, where's all the other pieces like it?
I mean, surely
there are.
Sotheby's or Christie's, wherever it was, should have had the paperwork from Bernie putting it into the auction. And it's like, where did Bernie get it from? Well,
no, he wouldn't have to say where he got it from. He'd just say, I want to sell it. You know, it's mine. It was during the Second World War.
What's the? Do you think of the film Steven Spielberg made where he mentioned the crystal sculpture?
Yeah, well, the thing was, what Sammy said. The story with Spielberg is that apparently he or his, whatever secretary or whatever, used to phone her up regularly because he wanted to see it. And initially, when he started doing this, he was well known for people that had seen Jaws, but Sammy didn't go and see those sort of films because she didn't know, he was just another person. And because he then said, well, Steven Spielberg, he was arrogant in that way. The story is that she said she didn't know who he was, but found him a bit arrogant, so didn't want him to come to the house, just because he wanted to. So he never got to see it. But what was interesting is that when I said I started off, writing this film script about a younger Indiana Jones, and that was the artifact I wanted to use as a sort of core of the story. At this point, he'd stopped making it Indiana Jones films, you see. But so when I went to see Sammy, I thought, well, your story and Mitchel Hedges is fantastic, true explorer, thing. I wouldn't mind doing a script on that. So I started writing. Mitchel Hedges wrote a book called Danger, My Ally. It was published. Danger, My Ally.
All right, yeah.
Frank F.H. Mitchel Hedges in the 1950s. It was printed before his death. He died at 56, I think. And basically, I did a film script of that. But the Spielberg, Indiana Jones, and we sent that. We tried to get Spielberg interested in that film script. Yeah, you did. But what happened? We got no reaction to that. Okay. But then later on, he came out with this Kingdom of the Crystal Skull. And what was interesting about that film is, in one point, they say, because they were worried that Sammy, for some whatever reason, I suppose it's Hollywood, paranoid about being sued for everything. They were worried about Mitchel Hedges and the legend of the Crystal Skull linked to the Mitchel Hedges Crystal Skull somehow being some legal action. That there's a line in the movie, which I think Indiana Jones says, which is the skull they're talking about. He says, it's not the Mitchel Hedges Crystal Skull. Because what he's really saying was it is, because he wouldn't bother mentioning it unless it's a very close connection. But for any lawyers that are watching, this isn't, we're not taking the Mitchel Hedges one.
So
ours is different. It's a slightly different shape and everything. It's not the Mitchel Hedges. But he was actually linking it, although he's trying not to.
Because Indiana Jones is loosely based on Mitchel Hedges.
Yeah, it is. It's the sort of legend of it, the legend of Crystal Skulls.
Because you told me skulls a few years ago that the scene where the boulder running out the cave is actually a scene from his actual life story, Mitchel Hedges.
Yeah, that was. He used to go into caves a lot. And lots of the boulders chasing him quite a lot.
What about the little alien? That's connected to him?
Yeah, well, what he did was, he was trying to find a sort of link between people travelling continents and civilizations. He was trying to piece together human history, and a lot of things he found didn't quite add up, But what he'd do, being a little bit of a rogue, he'd go on these explorations with just a very small team of people and some native bearers, and he'd always take some woman with him, which is a bit like Indiana Jones, I suppose, which is usually some lady or someone with money who financed it, especially in his early days, before he had money. So he'd go off with this sort of Lady Richmond Brown or someone like that, who happened to be quite good looking, as well.
Which helped.
Yeah, which does help. Sort of accompany as you're hacking through the jungle, sort of thing. And what they would do, when they found a tribe, they would put on a bit of a show. So, for example, she would, she'd have a sort of fancy dress thing, and she would dress up like that. And they'd let off a few fireworks and things. And then suddenly this tribe would think, oh my God, the gods have descended, sort of thing. And then he would have some medical stuff, and he'd cure them of fairly simple things.
So they'd worship him basically.
Well, what they do is they give him anything. Whatever he wanted, they would give him. He'd trade, because he'd got some ringworm out of their feet or something like that. And that's how he found, apart from everything else he saw, you could say it was a bit bad of him really, but he was an explorer in the days when Britain was going around pillaging everything. Yeah. So, but one tribe, the Chukanak, they're called, I think that's how you pronounce it, they had this strange little mummified, well, I don't know what you describe it.
It's a bit like the Arcana mummy that they've just been bringing out recently.
I don't know, to be honest. I don't know too much about that. It does. I think I know what you're talking about. This is about 6 inches, right? And I dare say you should put a photo of something, so people can see. And what it does, it looks like a baby grey, right? It really does. In the photo, it's in his book, the photo of this. Well, the interesting thing was, so he took this little thing, he didn't know how it was preserved, he brought it back to London and gave it to all the top well, like surgeons and things like that, various other people, and said, "Can you tell me what this is?" And none of them could say what it was. They couldn't tell him. You know, they said, "Well, maybe it's a monkey fetus, or it's a deformed human fetus at a very early thing." But the Chukanak called it the chief fetish, and it was used to heal things. It was like a witch doctor used to use it as, I don't know, I can't really compare it to anything, but if you were ill, they'd sort of place it on you or something like that. But it's an extraordinary looking thing. And anyway, he donated, in the end, they said, we don't know how it was preserved, and we don't know what it is, but it's a very, very strange object. We've never seen anything remotely like it. And so what he did is he donated it to the British Museum along with loads of other things.
And have they since done DNA tests on it?
Well, no, the story gets a bit thing. So I was interested in this little thing.
I remember.
And so I phoned up the British Museum and said, I'd like to view it. I'm a friend of Sammy she was called, not, you know, she knows Anna, but everyone called her Sammy Mitchell-Hedges, whose father donated these things to the museum. None of them are on display, but I'd love to see the little chief fetish of the Chukanak tribe. And they immediately said to me, well, not immediately, but they got back to me after a couple of days and said, we haven't got it, we've lost it, I'm afraid.
Convenient.
Seriously, they've lost it. So,
I mean, it's in the vaults in the back.
well,
hidden.
I mean, what else can I do, really? I can't really do anything. I say, well, they've lost it. So, anyway, I left it a couple of years, and I phoned up again. I said the same story, but spoke to someone else. You see. This time it was a girl, a young girl, and she was really interested. And she said, "Oh, we'll have a really good look for it." And this time they obviously did do a really good look, because she phoned me back about a week later and said, "We found it." I said, "Oh, where was it?" You know, I was interested to know what had happened to it. She said, "Well, it doesn't exist as an exhibit. But what had it done was he put it, when he gave it to the museum, he put it in a Japanese lacquer box, you see."
So it was
listed
as a box?
It was listed as Japanese lacquer box, and it was in the vault somewhere. And they'd gone through all his stuff. I've seen that they donated a box, and looked in the box, and there it was. And what's more, she said to me, "You can come and have a look at it if you want." So I went off. This is, I'm not going to say this bit, but I went off to have a look at it, right? And sure enough, the guy brings it out. He's a really nice guy. He's called Jim Hamill. I think he still works there. And he brought it out in a little box. And I said to him, what's the most interesting thing you found or seen? And he said, "Oh, it's something we found somewhere." And I'm looking at this thing. I'm thinking, well, surely this is the most extraordinary thing. Seriously. It was perfect.
Like? An alien?
His little skin, yeah, it was so fragile. All his little fingers, his little toes, and everything, and the skin was soft.
But it wasn't a fetus.
I
human
felt,
fetus.
well, to be honest, obviously human fetus have big heads, compared to the body, so,
But did you feel anything from it?
No, but the point is that a human fetus, if it was a human fetus, it would have been all bent up.
Bent up, yeah.
This is like upright. It's like
it'd been walking.
Well, not that it's been walking, but it's just absolutely straight. It's like amazing. I mean, I suppose you could have stretched it out and he dried it, but I felt when I looked at it in my hand, I felt it's going to blink at me any minute. It's mesmerising, this little thing. And anyway, I said to Jim Hamill, I said, "Look, surely we want to find out. We got, when he found it, it was way back in the 19 whatever it was. But now we've got DNA testing, everything. It's even seemed to got a little, little eyelashes or something.
That'd be
There's some little
interesting
hairs.
to get it looked at.
So I gave him a list of stuff. I said, "Look, this is what I'd like to do. You can't put him back in a little a Japanese lacquer box, because what if there's a flood or a burst pipe or something?" I said, "I'll pay for an airtight box for him to be put in, fireproof box, a safe deposit box or whatever. So he definitely can't be destroyed. And could you run some tests on him? Everything." I gave him a whole long list of things, about 20 points I sent to him. He never replied again. And that's the last.
So I'd love Emery Smith to get hold of that, because he does alien autopsies on things for their secret projects years ago. So he's just found one, but he's been called an akan. It's some desert's little mummies. So look, when I saw it, because I've seen your photograph, it looks identical. Another one, and that's supposed to be genuine. That was found in South America, I think, in the desert. So it'd be interesting, these little things floating around.
Well, it's either a deformed human fetus, a little monkey, monkey fetus, you know, or it's unknown as to what it is. And I'd love to know, you know, I really would. You know, that's one of the things in my life that I'm going to find out.
Yeah.
And I'm going to, funny enough, I was going to contact them again just
what
about a
about
month
all
or so
this,
ago.
Yeah, you've got to follow. What about all the hidden treasure that's and the treasure map that's in his White Tiger book?
Oh, well, there's a great story. Again, I think it's true. It sounds really far-fetched, but I'm pretty sure it's true because, as I said, I did meet Sammy, and I had such I had lots of talks with her. It was like, you know, I took her for little gifts. She took a shine to me at once. I took her a few little. What was a sewing kit from a liner, an old liner that she'd been on. Because for a while she sort of, you know, worked little jobs, and she worked on a liner. And it was a little sewing kit dating from late 20s, 30s. And she really took to me, surprisingly enough. And yeah, she did say, you know, a lot, which I do believe is true. But one of the stories was that Mitchel Hedges, he suddenly became very wealthy, and people were trying to find out why he did. You know, he just dealt on a few antiques, and he'd gone on these expeditions. And he always had to have someone to finance the expedition, you know, some woman. But then suddenly he became very, very wealthy. You know, multi-millionaire by today's standards. And how did he become wealthy, right? And Sammy said, well, we found some pirates' treasure. You know.
And that was in Gordon Cooper. They've just mentioned that in the Gordon Cooper's Gold, where he took photographs from space, and that guy's exploring. He's just found a Vimana on the bottom of the ocean now.
Yeah.
So, and he talks about that. He talks about Mitchell-Hedges and where he'd explored on that little island.
Yeah. Well,
I remember you telling me exactly
there's a
where
few
it is.
places in the book, yeah. But this is before then, because this is one of the earlier ones. And basically, they went ashore. And one thing about Mitchell-Hedges and Karma, which I like, is that he'd always plant anything, you know, seeds and stuff like that. And anyway, they found this coconut, and they were going to plant this coconut. They started digging, and they hit this pirate chest. I know it sounds far-fetched, but this is the story. There was another thing, that they also had a compass, because they went, you know, when they left the boat and walked around, they'd take a compass with them. And when they started planting this coconut thing, because he always wanted, you know, before his time, saving the planet, you know, always plant anything that you find, so it has a chance of growing. The compass went wild, so I thought, what's going on here? Yeah, and they said, well, there might be something down there. So that's the reason why they planted the coconut. They said, we'll dig here and we'll plant the coconut. They didn't find anything. And they found a whole load of treasure. You know, they found jewels,
but
jeweled
they
swords.
couldn't take all of it with them. There's still a couple of chests left. That's what I heard.
Yeah, there is that as well. They didn't take all of it. I don't know why I didn't go back for it. But anyway, what they did was they found some really nice items anyway. But the people who in the area, the sort of the government, they knew roughly what he's there for. So we're keeping an eye on him. So the problem was I didn't get this bloody stuff. So, but as I said to you, he's a big game fisherman. He's the only person I know that's actually gone fishing for a hippopotamus and caught one in South Africa. Seriously, that's another story that's funny. But anyway, so what they did was they caught this big bloody shark, and they stuffed it full of these items. They stuffed it full of gold, you know, gold and silver coins.
How they smuggled it out.
It's not how they smuggled it out. They just knew that the bloody government, or there wasn't customs in those days, but you know, the snoopers were likely to come on board the boat. And it's hard to hide a couple of chest loads of gold and silver coins in it. So they got this shark, had it on board, because they had a big boat, so they lived on it for months and months.
Look at he inspired yours.
Yeah, they're not my little dinghy, no. So what they did was they stuffed all the stuff in a shark, and they had the shark in the water. And so when the people came aboard, they searched the boat, and they said, "Oh, we're going home now. We're going up. We don't find anything. Just had a bit of fish and just caught this shark sort of thing." And then they left the boat, and they went off, And then obviously when they were out of sight, they sort of took it out of the shark, chucked the shark overboard, had it for dinner, and shark steak. And that's how he got it. And then he offloaded it, in various places like New York and stuff like that. He sold it all. And then he became very wealthy. And then he started dealing in massive bits of silver and very original items. Like, for instance, there's a photo of Cromwell's water bottle, which was leather. It was when you say a water bottle, it's not a bottle as it's like a space opera. Well, you obviously need a lot of water. You couldn't just go to a local stream or pond because it'd probably be, a bit polluted. So they found a decent well. They fill up, with this water bottle.
So they find out what ship it came out of? Did she say? Did they know?
What?
With the treasure that she found?
No. But they didn't care that they couldn't say they found it, right? Because they were meant to give it a bloody, whatever it was, the government would want some of it. So they didn't say they found it ever.
So the clues are
never said they found it.
The clues to where the treasure is in a book, isn't it? He wrote a book, and it's supposed to be.
Well, not where the treasure is. There's all sorts of hidden things in that book. Because he only wrote.
What's it called?
It's called White Tiger. He wrote books about fishing. That's what his prime love was. He used to go fishing for sharks off pool, sandbanks, sandbanks down there. But so he wrote several fishing books, battles with giant fish and things like that. Then he wrote, and he went exploring, obviously, and he wrote this book, which is meant to have clues about all sorts of things. It mentions crystal skulls, and it mentions other bits and bobs, but no one knows exactly what he's saying. But he's saying something, but no one sort of tried or successfully decoded it. But yeah, that's sort of Mitchel Hedges.
So how did you get involved with Eddie Page? Tell me about Project Aquarius.
Well, before that, I'd done a film script about Helen Duncan.
And
it was the last sort of medium to be imprisoned for witchcraft. It's not the last one to be tried. In the war, wasn't it? Yeah, basically they were worried that she would conjure up a spirit and it would give some secrets out about D-Day. She was doing seances in Portsmouth, and been a lot of people practicing for D-Day have been killed. And one of them, before, I'd been a sailor who came back and message for his mother. I didn't want one of these spirits of one of the people who'd been practicing for D-Day to come back and say, "I've just been killed somewhere, or whatever."
And give away the position of the U-boats and stuff.
Well, give away where we were going to land.
The English position.
No, where we were going to land, because the Germans thought we were going to land in a port, because that's the obvious place to land. We weren't. We're going on the
Didn't
Normandy
she do a
beaches.
famous séance with some admirals and stuff up in Scotland?
Yeah, that was in the early days. That was when a spirit came through. She was doing one in Scotland because she was Scottish. And a spirit came through who said that his ship had been sunk. Now, in the audience was a Brigadier Firebrace who what he did was, when he got back from the seance, he phoned up the Admiralty and said, "Has a ship just been sunk?" And they said, "No." Right. The next morning they phoned him back and said, "Actually, one has been sunk. It's the Hood. And it was only sunk, last night or whenever it was. And we weren't telling people it had been sunk. So how did you know about it?" And he said, "Well, because a spirit came and said."
Oh, God.
And I was at a seance.
Which?
And that got them thinking, you see. That was the first alarm bell.
She was the real thing, wasn't she?
Well, yeah, a lot of people swear that she was, yeah. But see, that was the first one. And then the second time she did it was a sailor in Portsmouth. A dead sailor appeared and said, and that was more mysterious, because his ship had been sunk, but the Germans didn't know it had been sunk, because they'd fired a torpedo at it through a U-boat, and they thought they'd only damaged it. In actual fact, it's sunk. But because the English knew the Germans thought they'd only damaged it because of Enigma, what they were getting through that, they wanted the Germans to think the ship was still where it was in the Mediterranean.
Propaganda.
So they wouldn't. Well, no. So they wouldn't. Do certain things. So they thought the ship was there.
So they arrested her.
No, they didn't. No, not there. No. This sailor appeared, all right, and said he was dead. But that's the last thing the Admiralty wanted, because they wanted everyone to think the ship was still afloat. So that was the second time she caused a problem. Now, the third time was when they were preparing for D-Day, and they weren't going where the Germans thought they were going, and they were preparing it at various places on the coast, which has sandy beaches. Okay, but people were still being killed. There was some, I think, mostly torpedo boats and Germans who surprised someone. So there was something, and they didn't want them to know how many there were there, training for it. So when she went down to Portsmouth, they decided we'll put someone in the audience and see if we can get her on something, and then we'll put her in prison or keep her cooped up until after D-Day. So it wasn't because of the sailor initially. That happened several years before. It was because D-Day is coming out, the greatest secret of a war, apart from Enigma.
So
the
they
second
actually
greatest
put
secret.
her in prison and tried her.
No,
as
what
a
they
witch.
did. Well, what they did was they went to the séance, right? There were two policemen in there, undercover. One had been to the séance before he went to the undercover thing as someone who was interested. And she started to do this thing. And it's important to say that unlike most séances, it's not sat around a table, okay? You have the people that are interested are sat in front of a cabinet. She's in a cabinet, which is a crudely made thing with a curtain across it. What she then did, and she was a very sort of fat lady, there was a lot of her, she would produce ectoplasm, which is like your breath on a frosty morning. This ectoplasm would come out of her mouth, nostrils, all right, and it would form the shape of the spirit of the person that we wanted to see, or wanted to talk to someone in the audience. So you would see that person, right? So it's not just
really.
yeah, but she was the only one that I've ever known that people have described who are almost living today that can do this. Other people say they can do it, right? I've heard a lot of them say all this bullshit. None of them can do it. None of them can do it, right? Let alone produce animals, people that people recognise with the right voices, everything. Yeah.
So the government obviously knew she was for real.
Well, no, I don't think. Well, there was a lot of people who believed in it at the time. Churchill did.
Because it was big in the day. Because Houdini used to go, and the other guy with the fairies. Can't remember.
But it wasn't whether they obviously some of them did believe in it, some of them didn't believe it. But what they weren't willing to do was take a risk on her. So that's why they sent these people there. But the joke was this. She went into a little, behind the cabinet, and then something started to appear. Now, they thought, well, whatever it is, it must be a sheet, because one of the others had seen these sort of white figures, and they thought, it must be a sheet, somehow. So they tried to grab it, and they couldn't get it, right? But by that time, they blew a whistle, and the police came in and everything, they arrested her. Originally it was fraud, because they thought they couldn't find the sheet. They searched everyone in this room, they couldn't find the sheet. And they then had a problem, because they're saying that she's fraudulent.
You have to prove it.
But they had to prove that she'd done something fraudulent. But without the sheet, they couldn't really, they hadn't got it. So they then changed the charge and said it was pretending to conjure up malevolent spirits. Well, they had a problem with that actually as well, because what she conjured up was never malevolent or evil. So they dropped that. Even though that was the law.
Well.
That was a law that dated from 17 something. So they went through all the laws to try and find something she'd done. But in the end, it was a very interesting trial. They had very little evidence. What the prosecutor was saying, it was all like a pantomime. And what the defence lawyer was saying was, well, how was it a pantomime? Because you were genuinely scared. That's why you blew the whistle so early as soon as something started to appear. And then you didn't find the sheet. So you've got really no evidence, no proof it was fraudulent. No one had asked for their money back, you know. So, but then they brought in literally, I think there's like 49 witnesses who had all been to seances in the past. Who'd all been to seances in the past, and all swore that the spirits she's conjured up were their mother. They recognised her. Things that only Mrs. Duncan wouldn't have known.
They didn't have the internet back then, so she couldn't have Googled it.
She couldn't have Googled it. It was more than that. What it was is small children. Right? She was a big lady. How could she do small children? She made a parrot appear, right? Pets appear, a rabbit that they'd eaten during the war. You know, that they were sorry. She goes, "Oh, my poor rabbit. I wish I hadn't cooked you."
So you ended up writing the book about her?
No, I didn't write a book. There were the books about her out there. What I did was put it into a sort of King's Speech script with someone else, a writer called Tim John. And basically, because of that, we found out granddaughter was still alive, and the granddaughter lives in America, although she's Scottish originally. She moved to America when she was very young, and then she met Eddie Page. I mean, that's the longest reply you'll ever get, isn't it?
Yeah,
how do I meet
it's
Eddie
really
Page?
Interesting.
But yeah,
and
that's
who's
the reason
Eddie
why.
Page? And how did you get to?
Oh,
go
she said to
for
me.
him?
She said to me, "Do you want to write a book for this guy called Eddie Page?" And at the time, I was sort of doing this place up, so I said, "No, I don't.
I'm the
I don't
only
want
UFO person you probably knew till then."
Yeah, well, I didn't really know very well. You know, I was interested in them, but I didn't know very much. But what she said is this: she said he's an alien hybrid, and I thought, oh, I've heard of this again.
Alien?
As well.
Did you say sorry?
Yeah, but you know, alien hybrid is that's how people think of him. That's how he's known. He was through the Lee Majors documentary. He's an alien hybrid. I said, yeah, well, right. Well, you know, and then she said, look, I know you think he probably doesn't. He's not real. But she said, I've had a conversation with him, and he said to me, go out in the garden with your phone, hold it up to the east, and you'll film a UFO. And she said, believe it or not, I went out in the garden, nothing, you know, it was still as can be. Started filming, didn't know where the east was, so moving the camera around. She goes, there was a voice on it. There's no one with me in the garden, there was a voice. It said, we hope you would join us in the still skies. In the still skies.
In the still skies?
Yeah.
Was it in her head she heard it, or just on the recording?
No, it's on the she didn't hear it at all.
That, then.
And you played it back.
Wow.
And what she said, right, this is the interesting bit, she said there's no UFO, but there's this voice. And it really spoke to her. She sort of said, well, you know, there's no one there. I'm alone in the house. I was on the veranda filming, and there was no one there, let alone a deep, gravelly voice. Anyway, she phoned Eddie up, and he said, there must be a UFO there. You know, look carefully. And she looked out the window, and there were a couple of the orb, you know, things. She took some photos of it. So what she said to me was, she said, look, I know you think he's not real, because no one would do if you just tell someone that, but he has somehow produced a voice on it's a trick that David Copperfield would be quite proud to do, David Blaine. And he also produced these glowing orbs in the sky. So, you know, if you've got nothing better to do for 3 months, you know, why don't you have a go? And then she said he worked for the CIA for 12 years. And she goes, okay, well, does he like them at the moment? Because I know I hate the CIA I hate them.
FBI are friends, CIA, well, yeah.
Yeah, but anyway. She said no, he had a falling out with them, and he sort of wanted to reveal a lot of the stuff he learned through them and make it public. So I said, okay, you know, I'm interested. You got me interested now, but to be honest with you, I'd like to see some documentation. And so she sent tons of it through, and then I checked with people, is that, you know, is this relevant? You know, is it accurate? You know, someone forged it, and as far as they could tell. Bear in mind, a lot of it was quite old. It was genuine.
And what was it that she sent you?
Oh, there were literally dozens of documents.
His service record for the CIA or anything?
No, not that. But, you know, various things anyway. Blood things, sort of birth certificate.
This is all in his book.
Documentation. Yeah. It's all in the book, all the documentation. But anyway, I then thought, well, he's about 63 years old, and to forge all these documents for me to write his book, he must either be, you know, an interesting head case or genuine. And either way, it'd be quite interesting to spend a few months getting to know him, because he can't travel out of America, so he hasn't got a passport. So I said I'd do it, you know, slightly still hesitant about it. But I have to say that he came up with just about everything I checked out, he was right about. He's made some predictions in the past that have come true. He's made some about the future that seem to be coming true in the last sort of, 2 years since he started talking to me about them. And on top of that, I made him cry because of the emotion in the book. And I don't think if he was lying, he'd cry. You know, it's just little things like that. Lots of things, that I was very dubious about to begin with. I'm not dubious about now. I know a lot of them are true. I can never know that they're all true. But anyway, so that's how it's pitched to me, really. And so I said, okay, this is what we'll do it, I need to get you to get some, Maggie, who's going to, she was living with Maggie at the time. I said, I need you to get some information out of him, and I've got the documentation, and this is how I'm going to do it, childhood through, I'm not going to try and, originally people were saying, well, start at the CIA and do that. I said, no, I really want people to know what he was like as a child and what happened to him at childhood, and then it sort of forced him to place better. So I changed the format around and took him through it, and I got far more information out of him. Seriously, every day I was sending him emails, and I was getting huge amounts of stuff back. So what I thought would take me about 3 months to do ended up taking 10 months.
And did you get any real life confirmation of any sightings yourself?
Well, that was the funny thing, you see, because I did think, because he was saying, he wants to do something about it all, and he said, you know what, I'd love to, people to send me their clips, and I'd tell people, well, that's a certain, a Palladian one, and that's a grey one, and that's that's obviously been photocom, because there aren't those sort of things. That's a fake one, that's not that. And I did, because I thought, I really hope I see something, and I did it with a friend. I was with a friend at the time, and so we did see some, and since then, that was when I was writing the book, so it did give me some sort of extra belief. There's no way what we saw could be accountable by anything. We both saw it. We saw it for about 10 minutes. I saw them for about 10 minutes. And so that gave me a boost, because it was hard work doing that book, because there's quite a lot of biblical stuff in, and I wasn't religious before I started writing that. But again, I checked out a lot of stuff he said, a lot of stuff on the internet, and I thought either he's researched it really well, but certain things he said are not quite true, but they make more sense than what's on the internet, and it all seemed to tie together. Everything he said tied together. And this year, on the subject of UFOs, I've seen loads of them, a certain type of them. So, which is again exactly what he said would happen. So, I actually do 100% believe in. There's certain things the CIA tried to do, give him a cover story, and he went out with that, and then people say, no, but now what you're saying isn't the same as what you're saying before. But that's the way the CIA work. They sort of sow doubt, and they give false, red herrings and false trails everywhere.
What was your favourite bit in the book that you thought, oh, wow, if people read that?
Well, it depends, really.
For me, it was his time in Vietnam, where he got taken onto the ship and healed from multiple bullet wounds. And I thought that was wow, because it's all recorded.
Yeah, but that is an interesting bit, and that got the Americans foxed, because basically what they knew at the time was that his helicopter had been shot down, he'd exited it, and then pilots overhead who were giving covering fire saw him being hit repeatedly by bullets, and then he was found without a bullet hole on him, but healed scars 500 miles away 11 days later. And they had, but what they didn't tell him for ages is they had sort of radar thing that was a strange craft that come down and dropped him off, sort of thing.
So military had sightings of the craft. So they knew he was.
Yeah, radar things.
And
they'd gone out looking for the craft and found him.
I remember when he went back, he'd lost his memory of everything before that. After he'd come back from Vietnam, they put him in a hospital.
He lost his memory of everything.
And his blood changed and everything was healed.
No,
and
his
stuff,
blood wasn't changed.
I thought he'd changed his internal organs. Everything.
They'd obviously been healed because he'd been hit by so many bullets. You know, they've actually shot his uniform off him. One of the interesting things about him,
uniform.
Yeah, he had his uniform. There wasn't any bullet holes in that, and it was beautifully pressed. And he was just left in a rice field.
They do ironing on the
miles from everywhere. So I mean, if you think about it, how could he be so immaculately dressed? Got there anyway. You know, there wasn't anything on it.
And he says his father is valiant for Anu. He doesn't come from Venus, he comes from the Pleiades.
He's straight about it. His father is God. Right?
As God is told from the Bible's perspective.
Yeah.
Who God was in the Bible.
Well, not only the Bible's perspective.
Enki,
Sumerians, Greeks, Anu. Romans, Zeus, whatever you want to call it.
Yeah,
He's
so
God.
it's Anu and Zeus.
Aphra, Anu.
Thor. Yeah, so it's all written in the biblical text because I don't do religions, I do all of them, but it's the same family because they come from Pleiades, but obviously I know from before that it was Lyra.
Yeah, I mean that was a big enough thing for me because first of all it says he's you know, he's meant to be a hybrid, but he's really extraterrestrial.
And to me, a hybrid means that he's got the seed, he's got the DNA of the Palladian, Anu. And he was born to a human mother, and the human mother was abducted.
But he didn't.
And his soul was allowed to come in.
What's
his view of that?
No, the mother couldn't have children.
Right.
She didn't have ovaries.
So he was actually conceived somewhere
What
else.
he says is they position him as a hybrid, but he's not. Right? We're the hybrids.
He's a full-on.
Yeah. But because people say, well, you had an Earth mother, and no one knows who your father was, but you must be half.
So he was planted, she was a surrogate mom.
Yes, she was just someone.
Well, we've got technology to do that these days. We can take a fetus with other people's DNA and put it in a surrogate.
We could, yeah.
Same thing.
Yeah, we could.
And that's what happened with Mary Magdalene. She was a surrogate as well. So I'm just saying.
Well, funny enough, you see, I didn't. As I say, the first thing was that when Maggie's pitching this to me, she says he's a hybrid, right? Then she says he's extraterrestrial. Yeah, but much the same thing, I suppose, you know. But then she said he's the son of God. I mean, that's taking it another leap forward, isn't it? It's hard enough to sort of get your head around.
To me, God is. It goes to religion, but when you go to like higher consciousness, God is just the person who's put their genetics into a civilization, and the people at the time, being of a lesser consciousness and not as aware as maybe we are these days, would have called that person God. Like Mitchel Hedges was treated as a god because he had more tricks in his bag. To me, that's God from the Pleiades. So he had more tricks, more technology, and that's just for the religious people out there. I'm sorry, but you think God was an ET, but yeah.
Well, that's what he says. You see, he says in the book. He says, "What would you rather? Would you rather your ancestor was an ape, or a god?" And people would rather more accepting that they come from apes rather than God. But anyway, his father doesn't want to be called a god. Right?
No, God is like president.
It's not.
President of
it's
the
not a god. You've made him a god, and you've created
God.
You've created this religion.
Yeah, it's ridiculous.
Although there's some truth in the Bible, right?
Yeah,
a lot of it is truth and things that did
all
happen.
Angels are extraterrestrials, higher intelligence beings.
Yeah, but it's not him that calls himself
like
a god.
Michael.
He wouldn't want you. He don't want you going down on your knees. All right.
Oh God, no.
Nothing like that. That's why he's so anti. You see.
So who are Michael and
what
Daniel?
I'm trying to say to you is that first of all, he said he was a hybrid, right? That I can just about get my head around. Then he said he was extraterrestrial. That's more or less the same. Then he said he was a direct son of God, like Jesus, right?
Yeah.
So I thought, well, that's pretty mind blowing. Then he said he sort of worked for the CIA and everything. But it's almost too far to go in one leap. Right.
You have to take it in stages.
You can't get anyone's head around it.
No,
no
because
one.
People will go in who are very religious and still programmed by the religions, you know, because it is a program. It's literally a handbook for how to live on Earth.
Yeah.
But it's been tampered with by the people who run the country. It's like, it's called history because it's his story, and it's whoever's in charge at the time. Whoever wins the war gets to write the history.
That's
and
what
they
Eddie
twist
says,
it into their own program, and it's been infiltrated. But he's come back with a message, hasn't he?
Well, see, that's the next step on. Right, so it's bad enough that he's all these things. His father's God, or the one we know is God, right? But then it's, why is he here? And then that's another thing that's difficult to
And the
get your head around
Vatican are
as well.
involved because they know why he's here, because they're the ones who edited the Bible in the first place.
And again, that was some of the paperwork he sent through, you see. Because the Vatican have got, everyone knows this, got about 5 mile, well, not everybody, but everyone knows that they know a lot more than they say. And they've got a lot of artefacts, because you know there's vaults under the, the Vatican. But one of the things that they've got there is some ancient texts that were predicting the arrival of these children. And they were then working out when the stars were going to be in the right alignment and when they were going to arrive.
And that's where the Lucifer telescope comes in, that the Vatican own in America.
Well, yeah, but I'm going back now to 1937, right?
Probably why they built it.
They wrote to the CIA and said, these children are starting to come. There'll be strange births, a bit like Jesus, right? We'll tell you roughly where they're going to be born, and we want you to find these children and deliver them to us. Well, it was 2 to begin with. We want you to deliver them to us. Well, the CIA, they obviously thought, well, I don't suppose they believed it, but they thought we might as well keep him with the Vatican, right? So they kept a watch out for the first 2 to arrive, which was the twins, Michael and Daniel. Then Eddie then tied that in with Roswell, 1947. Roswell
Oh, they landed on the craft. They were actually delivered on the craft.
No.
And they had the balls. We'll drop them off here.
No, the Varana, the lady in Varana, was coming to check on the mother, who had been taken up into it and become the surrogate mother of the twins. The twins were due, they'd come and check on her. The twins were okay inside her. Now what happened at Roswell, Eddie, was that 2 grey flying saucers, not the Varana, tried to stop the Varana
to get to Earth to do the mission.
To check on the mother. They didn't want the twins to be born.
Of course not. They wanted to keep control of the planet for their overlords.
What happened was the Varana took the 2 flying saucers out. One crashed. It crashed over a long distance. A lot of people don't know where exactly it crashed.
Yeah, because there was 3 crashes, wasn't there?
No,
I thought
there was
2
2.
2 originally, and then there was another landing.